Setiap perayaan ada insan yang ikhlas menyediakan sajian. Tanpanya, tiadalah seri perayaan. Dikaulah jiwa raya. Dapatkan resepi hebat di maggi.my.
Kerap menggaru kulit kepala disebabkan kelumumut, masalahnya lebih mendalam. Gunalah Head & Shoulders baru, menembusi 5 lapisan untuk membasmi kelumumut dan kegatalan. Bebas kelumumut sehingga 100%. Head & Shoulders baru.
Hai, selamat raya. Dah nampak extra ceria. Wanginya baju.
Inilah dia Top Magical Infusion. Ira terus ceria, bersih dan wangi.
Gaya raya ceria bersama Top.
Selamat Hari Raya dari Top.
TOP Top.
Seterusnya, peminjam Perbadanan Tabung Pendidikan Tinggi Nasional atau PTPTN digesa merebut peluang insentif diskaun bayaran balik pinjaman.
Fenomena Equinox menjadikan bumi dan matahari berada pada jarak paling dekat dalam sistem solar.
Malaysia berjaya membanteras jenayah berkaitan dadah bernilai RM990 juta sejak 2019.
Jangan meletakkan harapan tinggi berhubung soal mencari jawapan pesawat Malaysia Airlines MH370 yang hilang 10 tahun lepas.
Kementerian Perumahan dan Kerajaan Tempatan mengetengahkan 10 inisiatif bagi meningkatkan kesejahteraan serta aspek daya huni rakyat. Inisiatif penyediaan rumah mampu milik, penyelenggaraan dan penggantian lift usang di program perumahan rakyat dan perumahan awam, penarafan bandar pintar, My Kiosk Niaga, tandas awam bertaraf bersih, menawan dan wangi. Inisiatif penyelenggaraan rumah ibadat bukan Islam seluruh negara. Balai-balai bomba baharu 2023. Penggunaan helikopter Emergency Air Ambulance Rescue Services (EMARS). Penutupan hotspot sampah haram. Dan peningkatan penyampaian perkhidmatan melalui Ease of Doing Business. Kerajaan Madani komited dalam menambah baik infrastruktur bagi kesejahteraan dan pembangunan negara.
Penggunaan Android Box makin membarah. Kedai-kedai makan galak siar kandungan sukan haram. Guna akaun peribadi untuk sajikan rancangan kepada pelanggan di premis perniagaan juga adalah satu kesalahan. Aspek keselamatan, curi kandungan secara haram tak dipedulikan. Penat lelah pencipta kandungan tidak difikirkan. Mungkin mereka tak tahu atau buat-buat tak tahu. Jenayah pengedaran kandungan haram boleh dihukum penjara atau denda jika disabit kesalahan. Jangan biar perniagaan rosak kerana cetak rompak. Jaga nama, keselamatan dan reputasi anda.
Baik, bertemu kembali dan waktu ini kita terus saja langsung daripada Riyadh, Arab Saudi untuk Mesyuarat Khas WEF yang antara lain dalam sesi plenari pembukaan ini akan ada ucapan daripada Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Ibrahim.
Data centers could absorb a quarter of power generation of some countries, while in others, many remain deprived of electricity access. Meanwhile, geopolitical conflict and climate change have led to the resurgence of ills we thought we had banished for good, such as famine and cholera in the 21st century. It is against this sobering background that we convene here today. This gathering presents an opportunity to infuse the world with optimism and the spirit of collaboration once more. Khalil Gibran, a poet from my own village, once said, "Progress lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing toward what will be." And if there's one place where such progress has been embraced unabashedly, it is here in Saudi Arabia, where bold vision meets ambitious action. With that in mind, I now invite Birge Brande, President of the World Economic Forum, to share his opening remarks. Birge, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maroon. He's our Middle East director. Thank you to you and your team for putting all this together. I think it's been 24/7 for 3 months. Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies, esteemed guests and friends, it's great to see you here in the Kingdom. It's our first meeting in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we are very proud to have you all here as our guests. Let me start with extending the World Economic Forum's gratitude to His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, under whose patronage this meeting is taking place. We started to discuss this meeting a few years ago, and know it is really happening. And the interest for what is happening in the Kingdom couldn't be larger, and I think all the guests here is a testimony to that. Our special meeting also could not have come without His Royal Highness commitment and the full support of the Saudi government. Thank you, shukran. And the meeting could not have come at a more critical moment for the region and for the world. We are facing a series of urgent challenges across 3 fronts. A recession of cooperation, as the war in Gaza continues and over 114 million people around the world are displaced by conflicts, the highest level ever. How to address energy security and access to electricity for 800 million people that don't have access to electricity globally, and decouple this access from growth in greenhouse emissions to meet Paris obligations. And thirdly, and the potential economic stagnation, as growth, though in positive territory, continues to be fragile and uneven. The coming 5 years are projected to see the weakest level in decades. So we'll then look at how we can revive more growth back to the level that we have had during the last 2 decades. Many of the challenges are interconnected, all require cooperative solutions to solve. And the Middle East is at the heart of shaping security, energy, and development paths forward. This is why we have convened 1,000 leaders here in Riyadh, as yourself, across 60 governments, and 92 nations are represented. And we also have more than 500 companies, a dozen of civil society organizations for this meeting. It is only by coming together we can chart a course toward a more secure, stable, and sustainable future. Even in a fragmented world, there are areas where we can collaborate, and we have to identify those areas. So it is now my pleasure to welcome my dear friend, His Excellency Minister Faisal Ibrahim, the Minister of Economy and Planning of Saudi Arabia, that we have worked so closely together with the Minister and his team. And I'm so happy, Minister Faisal, that you are here for all your support. And I now give you the floor to give the opening remarks on behalf of the Kingdom. Thank you very much, and again, welcome.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is my distinct honor to welcome all of you to Riyadh for the World Economic Forum special meeting on global collaboration, growth, and energy for development. Today, as we convene at this historic gathering, we stand at a crossroads of opportunity and responsibility. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has long embarked on its own journey of creating opportunity and growing global responsibility. Under the guidance of His Majesty King Salman, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman launched Vision 2030 to propel our bold transformation. The result is an open, dynamic, global platform which has set the stage for crucial dialogues like this one to tackle our greatest social, economic, and human challenges. Today, as I look across this room, I see people committed and determined to chart a course towards a stable, secure, and sustainable future. We gather at a time when the world is on the cusp of transformative change. Our economies, communities, and industries are faced with unprecedented challenges, but also immense opportunities. This special meeting could not be more timely or relevant, with three key themes that are integral for long-term progress: inclusive growth, energy for development, and global collaboration, each of which requires our undivided attention. Inclusive growth is not just a lofty ideal, it is a categorical imperative. We must co-create a global economy that works for everyone, where every nation has the chance to thrive regardless of its wealth or status. This means investing in people, in their skills, in their education, and in their well-being. We must also harness and direct new technologies to benefit humanity. Artificial intelligence has the potential to contribute trillions of dollars to the global economy over the next decade. Its adoption will disrupt the way we live and work, but it will also pave the way for new industries to emerge. Its benefits must be accessible to all, and its risks carefully managed. AI must uplift humanity, not exacerbate its inequalities. Energy is the lifeblood of our economies, but it must be produced, supplied, and consumed responsibly. We cannot allow a world where some have access when others do not. We must invest in clean and renewable solutions, and we must do everything we can to balance the energy trilemma of security, equity, and sustainability. No one should be left in the dark. But let's be clear, none of these problems or challenges exist in a vacuum. They do not know borders. So let me ask you this, frankly. Do we really think we can overcome these challenges individually? Does it really make sense that we as a global community only come together on some of these challenges, but not others? When we look at the success and progress we achieve when we find common ground and work together, we arrive at a simple truth, that global collaboration is not optional, it is essential. This critical juncture for human development calls for a convergence of cultures and ideas. We are all in the same boat, and we can either collaborate to steer it towards peace and prosperity, or we will drift towards a future that is out of our control. As we set the stage for the discussions over the next 2 days, let's not take this opportunity for granted. This meeting is a unique gathering of diverse perspectives and expertise. So I urge you to engage deeply and go against conventional wisdom. And I challenge you to have difficult conversations and be uncomfortable. For it is through candid dialogue that we can truly innovate and find lasting solutions. We must hold ourselves responsible, and we must ask ourselves, what can we do over the next 2 days? Can we course correct? Or will we let this opportunity to shape a brighter future drift away? We can seize this moment to unlock our collective potential and fulfill our shared responsibilities. Together, we can revitalize international collaboration and fire up new engines of growth that will empower generations to come. You see, there are moments in history that must be captured when the stakes are high. This is one of those moments. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this moment, to this place, to this land of dreamers, innovators, risk takers, and doers. Welcome to the Global Growth Platform. Welcome to Riyadh.
Excellencies, dear friends, if you could please remain seated while we prepare for the opening plenary, which is going to start in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the opening plenary is about to start. Borge, esteemed speakers, President of Nigeria, President of Rwanda, Prime Minister of Malaysia, MD of the IMF, and CEO of Lazard, if I could please ask you all to come to the stage.
Good morning again. Thank you for joining us. We have this all-star panel to open our very consequential meeting. The meeting could not have taken place against a more complex geopolitical backdrop, that's for sure. We will, at this panel, look at how we can revive growth. We know that global growth is back. I think we expect around 3.1%, 3.2% global growth this year. The trend growth, though, for the last 2 decades has been 4%. So we should look into how we can get back there. But we know that the single biggest risk we are faced with now is geopolitics. So just a few weeks ago, it could have ended with a full escalation in this region between Iran and Israel. That was avoided. But there's also a lot of other challenges geopolitically that we have to deal with, but also to avoid further escalation. We're coming back to that. We also have His Excellency President Abbas of Palestine with us here on the first row, and we know there is very important discussions going on just in this moment around the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. But to discuss all these topics, we, as I said, we really have such an excellent panel, and I think they're all ready to get started. We have Madam Kristalina Georgieva, the Managing Director of the IMF, and 2 weeks ago also given a new 5 years period. That was the best news that week, Kristalina. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Maybe the only good news that week, I don't know. Then we have His Excellency Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim. Thank you, Prime Minister. So good to see you. Then we have President of Nigeria, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Great to see you at the World Economic Forum. And our very good friend, His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of Rwanda. Great to see you, Mr. President. And last not least, Peter Orszag, CEO of Lazard, United States of America. Thank you, welcome. So, let me start with Madam Georgieva, Kristalina. We do see economic growth, but you have also said that this economic growth is not sufficient, and you are concerned that the coming decade could be a repetition of the 70s. We had growth, but it was quite meager. How can we get ourselves into a situation where we can get growth back on where we were, around 4%?
Salam alaikum. Let me start by congratulating the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the incredible success in implementing Vision 2030. And I'm starting from that because we see that when there is determination to build strong fundamentals and unleash the potential for growth, it is possible to diversify the economy and have the achievements that Saudi Arabia is demonstrating. What we have learned over the last years and during the spring meetings is threefold. First, that the world has built overall stronger fundamentals for growth. The world economy has proven to be resilient to repetitive shocks, and the question is why? The answer, because especially after the global financial crisis, in the case of Asia, after the Asia crisis, governments have taken to heart the need to have sound fiscal policies, the need to manage their public finances responsibly, and to create conditions for private sector-led growth. So fundamentals pay off. But we also recognize that we face two very serious problems. The first one is the one that you outlined. Growth, yes, 3.2% for this year, but really weak by historical standards. And two, significant divergence across the world. Some countries doing really well, and others falling behind. Unless we tackle these two problems, we are going to have a difficult time. We may end up this decade being remembered as the turbulent 20s or the tepid 20s, and what we actually want is transformational 20s. You're asking me, what can we do? What we do is continue to build the strength of your economies by being responsible in your public finances, being responsible in monetary policy. There is no substitute for it. In fact, after these years of testing the limits of public finance to support households and businesses, time has come to rebuild fiscal buffers, to rebuild that strength. But then, foundation is good, you have to take it further. How do you take it further? Absolutely essential to unleash the power of technology and pair this with human capital capable of moving across different employments and opportunities more in a more agile manner. And it is absolutely essential that we work together, that this special ingredient of international cooperation, trade, is reinforced in the years to come. I want to finish with the following observation. Over the last 100 years, despite a huge Second World War, despite the Cold War that followed, we as humanity have achieved so much. Life expectancy almost doubled. Income per capita has increased 8 times, with the population almost tripling. And the question is, how did we do it? We did it with technology, and we did it with capital accumulation and then deployment of capital to generate that wealth. Where did we fail? And we have to be honest and admit it. In a world of plenty, we still have almost 800 million people who are hungry. We failed to more inclusively share the benefits of this growth. So I look forward, I'm an optimist, I think I belong to Saudi Arabia. I look forward, and I think the next 100 years we can achieve the same degree of wealth, but with much better distribution of the benefits of growth. And may we have the will to work together to achieve that.
Wow. Thank you very much, Kristalina. I got a little bit more optimistic now after listening to you. There are also great opportunities ahead of us. Let's avoid this decade, the 20s, to become the turbulent and with tepid growth. Let's do transformational changes that will also pave the ground for future growth and prosperity. Let me then go to Prime Minister Ibrahim. Malaysia has done pretty well. Growth is back. You're also benefiting from the changes in the global value chains, where we see more nearshoring, also called friendshoring. You become one of the nations with big semiconductor, at least chip as industry. But you're also dealing with the productivity issues at home. And listening now to Madam Georgieva, what is your take on the current geoeconomic and geopolitical situation? It is complex also in your region. So what is your vision?
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Those difficult, complex global questions should be addressed to the MD of IMF. But anyway, I must, I think, begin by expressing my profound gratitude to the kingdom under the leadership of King Salman and Crown Prince Muhammad, because coming from a majority Muslim country in emerging economies, the initiative taken by the kingdom cannot be underestimated. The importance is profound because the kingdom is seen to be the leading voice on Islam, on progress, on development. This did not happen in the past. So when they start focusing on the issues of development, of globalization, of digital transformation, of energy transition, that by itself has appealed to the concerns and the support of many of these countries. Many of our Muslims look up to the initiative. That's why I think I must give credit. And Minister, please convey that we see this in this light. So you must continue to play this role to engage, particularly those in the developing economies, emerging economies. Notwithstanding the complex situation, the turbulent times affecting the region, particularly the anger, frustration over the Palestinian issue and the Gaza crisis, that shows complete abdication of responsibility, particularly countries in the West. But notwithstanding that, the kingdom wants not to be completely distracted with the issue. The issue is important, is fundamental to us, but at the same time, we have to survive. The economy has to be strong. The fundamentals have got to be built. So Malaysia is again fortunate in a region that is possibly most peaceful in the world and the fastest growing economy. And we then, particularly Malaysia, now start focusing on issues. Firstly, I think, Christina, you made a very important reference to the issue of governance, fiscal responsibility, because without that, countries cannot move. You must start with certain priorities, because countries can grow, has enormous potential. We had that experience in the 1990s. In fact, with the World Bank and the IMF considers this as the East Asian miracle. I quite dispute that, but notwithstanding, it was spectacular. We have seen spectacular progress. But we also have to learn from the flaws of endemic corruption, of gross inequality between the rich and the poor, the propensity to adopt unbridled capitalism to the extent that you ignore the plight of the masses deprived from basic opportunities. So we have to steer that policy issue of governance, of fiscal responsibility. At the same time, do not lose sight of the key priorities, which is relevant in this session. The issue of globalization, of interdependence. We adopt a very fierce foreign policy position to engage and depend on the support, collaboration, investments from the West, the United States, Europe. At the same time, maintain excellent bilateral relations with China, Korea, Japan, and more importantly with China because of the potential. And of course, we have to grapple with these sensitivities, which is not our problem, is the problem of the rest. And I've said it probably quite pronounced in Australia when asked. I said, please do not impose your problem upon us because we are in an emerging economy with enormous problems of our own. We have to now grapple with the issue of digital transformation. And so you mentioned about these semiconductors. We are fortunate because we have been now the focus. In the past has been always in the back end. But with the new investments coming in from America, from Germany, from China, the focus has shifted to the front end, which means new challenges. We have to train differently. We have to refocus on the issue of technical training and TVETs, which was somewhat ignored in the past. We have to excel in some of the research areas, which is challenging and new. And I should conclude by saying that for these sort of forums is critically important to us. And I choose to come precisely because of that, to show that the initiative taken by the Kingdom and the issues being addressed and focus, of course, with the support of the World Economic Forum, would be of enormous benefit to us and ASEAN as a region.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Ibrahim. And you can also count on our support when you're embarking on your presidency of ASEAN in 2025. President Tinubu of Nigeria, I think you took over the presidency last year in May, so you have had 11 months as president. You took over at a critical time for Nigeria. The economic situation was tough, but you took measures from the beginning to then recalibrate the economy. You cut the subsidies on fossil fuels. You also took aims at dealing with the currency. And of course, it's been a tough year economically for Nigeria, but I guess you're now seeing also some light in the end of the tunnel. And Nigeria being such an important economy, not only in Africa, in the world, how do you see now the prospects and what are your next steps to really make Nigeria's economy grow further?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. And let me, in addition, join in congratulating the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for putting this opportunity together. I know it's not easy. For Nigeria, we are immensely consistent with our belief that the economic collaboration and inclusiveness is necessary to engender stability in the rest of the world. Concerning the question of the subsidy removal, there's no doubt that it was a necessary action for my country not to go bankrupt. One, to reset the economy and the pathway to growth. It is going to be difficult, but the hallmark of leadership is taking difficult decisions at the time it ought to be taken decisively. That was necessary for the country. Yes, there will be blowback. There is expectation that the difficulty in it will be felt by a greater number of the people. But once, I believe it was their interest that is the focus of the government. It is easier to manage and explain the difficulties. Along the line, there is a parallel arrangement to really cushion the effect of the subsidy removal on the vulnerable population of the country. We share the pain across board. We cannot but include those who are very vulnerable. Luckily, we have a very vibrant, youthful population interested in discoveries by themselves and highly ready for technology, good education, committed to growth. We were able to manage that and partition the economic drawback and the fallout of the subsidy removal. Equally, it engendered transparency, accountability, and physical discipline for the country. And that's, to me, is more important to focus on what direction we should go. And we pursue that rigorously. The currency management was necessary equally to remove the artificial element of value in our currency. Let's our local currency find its level and compete with the rest of the world currency and remove arbitrage, corruption, and opaqueness. That's what we did. At the same time, that's a two-engine problem in a very turbulent situation for the government. But we are able to manage that turbulence because we prepared for inclusivity in governance and rapid communication with the public to really see what is necessary and what you must do. Today's forum is equally valuable for us to share experiences and share the hope of the future. What is missing? And I'm glad the kingdom rely on the window, the word collaboration and inclusiveness. The capital formation that is necessary to drive the economy, like agriculture, food security, innovation, technology advancement, must be an inclusive program of the entire world. No one should be left behind. The fear of lack of capital in Africa, stigmatization, and I'm glad the world is recognizing the need that the type of population growth that Africa is experiencing, the diversity of its resources, must be married with its economic opportunity. We must collaborate to do that, and that is what we are doing so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you also, Mr. President, for underlining so much the importance of inclusiveness, even in a situation where you have to go through necessary structural changes. President Kagame, Rwanda is doing well economically. We are expecting 7% economic growth in Rwanda this year, but it is a complicated neighborhood. It is a complicated world, and it's all about also investments and also innovation. You're also being one of the leaders behind the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and a successful implementation of that could add a lot of growth to Africa, and it can become one of the largest single markets in the world. Listening to your colleagues here, but also the complexities, how do you see Africa in the years to come? How can Africa manage in this transformative decade, as Kristalina was mentioning?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for enabling us to be here to have this very meaningful discussion. Straight away to the question, it's even more complicated than that, and we cannot understand where we have come from as Rwanda without looking at the history, the geography, everything is complicated that you have to deal with. And even in the development of our economy and our country generally, it's like you are always fighting for every step of the way forward. And that therefore means when we are talking about inclusivity, it's not just a word, a nice word, and with a nice meaning. It's a lot of work to do, even complex, like in our country, and that background I've just mentioned. At the same time, we don't look at ourselves just as Rwanda and with all those complications about history and geography and so on and so forth. We see ourselves in the setting of the continent of Africa that has a lot to share. So growth we have realized and continue to realize is driven by what we try to do within the country itself with those constraints, but also looking at what we can do with the sub-regions we find ourselves in or cooperating with. But everything adding to the optimism that was talked about, looking at where Rwanda has come from and where it is now, should actually add to the optimism that people should have, looking at even a much wider aspect of where the world is coming from and where it is going, and therefore also Africa and where it is going. In our case, I'd say a few things that tie all those together. One is putting the people at the center of everything we are doing. And therefore, that means investments in our human capital. How do we develop it, and how does it find that space to be able to contribute and to their own well-being and development? And in that, we have invested in education, in health, and above all, technology has been a focus for us, and integrating that in the education system or in the health services as we move forward. Like for health services, for example, we find we have made use of technology like drones, where you find drones are developing and are delivering health services to rural hospitals and so on and so forth. So I'm talking about investing in education, in education and technology and health, but being brought together by that technology that we also invest in. I think that was mentioned, and technology keeps changing, and it's evolving to new levels of complexity. That's why we're talking about artificial intelligence. Even in that area, Rwanda has not been left behind. We are investing in that, as well as we invest in agriculture. How does it move forward, and how do we have food self-sufficiency, and how do we also take that into the integrated continent we are talking about. In Africa, we have developed the African Continental Free Trade Area, the biggest, in fact, in the world. What we are trying to do now is to make sure that it becomes real. The obstacles that are there for the African continent to come together are removed, but it takes time, it takes a lot of effort, but that is happening. And I'm sure my brother here, President Tinubu of Nigeria, is involved in this as well because of the importance of his country. But we are seeing Africa, much as you may find problems here and there, Africa is coming together, Africa is moving forward. Different countries have decent or impressive growth of the economy. This can't be coming from nothing, but the good efforts that Africans are putting in place. And therefore, it is important that from this, the rest of the world really looks at Africa as an important entity in the global affairs, where it is politics, economy, and so on and so forth. So, but Rwanda, we have come from the dead 30 years ago. We are now alive and thriving, and it's investments in our people and accountability and governance that we bring into play and which we share with the rest of the continent.
Thank you. Thank you, President Kagame, and I think it's is really a very consequential story. 30 years coming from the dead, and today one of the fastest growing countries in Africa, in the world, with 7%. And when I just visited you and the capital, you can see the dramatic changes that is happening. So it is possible. Coming now to Peter Urzag, CEO of Lazard. Many questions that I could have raised, but I have seen, Peter, that you have said that also the big risk that we are faced when it comes to the global economy is the geopolitics. Is that correct?
I think it is, but first let me again join my fellow panelists in saying what an honor it is to be here and to commend the Kingdom for the path that you are clearly on. And start with a note of optimism, because I am an optimist. In addition to the AI revolution, which has already been mentioned, this is a phenomenal time for business and frankly for the state of humanity. The biotech revolution, the potential of the energy transition to reinvent the way that we obtain our energy. There are so many different revolutions happening at the same time, and there are perhaps early signs of some benefit from that. So, as an example, productivity growth in the United States over the past couple of years has started to pick up. It's too early to know whether that's related to these opportunities, but it's certainly possible. But to harness the benefit of those revolutions and the full potential requires a underlying structure that is not quite there. So businesses today basically are, in some sense, getting too much from policymakers and also getting too little. So let me try to explain that. In the too much category, businesses are now caught in the middle of many foreign policy and other geopolitical issues. Every major company in the United States, Europe, and elsewhere now requires the sort of geopolitical insight that used to be the domain only of oil and gas companies that were operating in complex environments. Now, pretty much every company needs that kind of capability. That's great for Lazard because we provide that kind of insight, but it's probably not so great for productivity because fundamentally you can't make an important business decision today without taking geopolitics fully into account, and that is different than 2 or 3 decades ago. During the Cold War, tension with Russia did not have any significant business impact because Russia was not that important to the global economy. That's not true with regard to where the geopolitical fractures are today. On the too little side, policymakers have not really fully stepped up to many of the core challenges that have already been identified, and the result of that is that companies are being asked to fill the void on social and other issues that policy hasn't fully fulfilled. So that is never going to end that well. That is a very, very, very imperfect third or fourth best relative to the structure that policymakers can put forward. So this is on everything from purely social issues to even the energy transition. I think there's been a lot of happy talk about what's involved in the energy transition. It is going to be expensive and it is going to be hard. Reasonable estimates are something like 10% of GDP per year through the next several decades invested in new sources of energy. And that's before you fully take into account the impact of artificial intelligence, at least given current chip design. Maybe the chips will change, but given current chip design on additional demand for electricity. That is a very, very tall bill, and the thought that companies are going to be meeting the vast bulk of that bill is unrealistic. So there's both too much and too little, but I want to end again on a note of optimism because it's a very propitious time for a lot of these technologies. let's just try to capture them as best as possible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a short follow-up question, because we are all curious about the U.S. economy. The U.S. is still 25% of the global GDP, with 5% of the global population. And there was expectations for a recession in the U.S., then there was soft landing, but now it seems like there is no landing, and there's also speculations that Fed even have to increase interest rate when we were expecting decrease in the interest rate in the summer. So we see that inflationary pressure is still there. So there are different ways of looking at this. We saw that JP Morgan is worried that there will be a very rough landing. What kind of landing will there be in the U.S. economy if there is going to be a landing?
Sure, I'll answer that question, and then I'll say I think it's probably partially the wrong question, but let me answer it first. My view, I'm pretty optimistic on this. I think the U.S. economy has weathered the past several years extremely well. The consumer is still relatively strong. The labor market is strong. I mentioned that productivity has picked up. That means that unit labor cost growth is also contained. Those are all really good things for the fight against inflation. My own view is I think there's a temporary hiccup, just like there was at about this time last year, where inflation went sideways instead of continuing its downward path. I'm optimistic that the downward path will resume, so time will tell, and some humility is warranted because there's a lot of uncertainty. But I think the most likely path is one in which inflation continues to come down. But there are underlying problems in the U.S., and I would highlight the fiscal trajectory, where the deficit over the next 2 decades is projected to be 6 to 7% of GDP, and then polarization. The country is incredibly polarized. We obviously have an election coming up, and it is, I mean, as an example, I was confirmed as President Obama's budget director 15 years ago. At my confirmation hearing, Paul Ryan introduced me, and the Senate vote was 100-0. That would never happen today, and that was only 15 years ago. So in a very polarized environment, presidential elections are going to be very close. This will probably be determined by 1 million or 1.5 million people. And secondly, it's very hard to get serious policy done unless you control the White House, the House, and the Senate, and that only happens very infrequently.
So I think the question we're left with, how can such a dysfunctional political system deliver that kind of economic growth? But I see the managing director is asking for the floor, and you will, of course, madam, get the floor. I have the challenge that we now have 10 minutes left. It means that each of the excellencies have 2 minutes. Of course, it's hard to ask excellencies like you guys to land, but I would love to hear you, but then do a 2-minute. But, Kristalina, I'll come back to you, but I'll come to you now. But I think there is a good segue here, because the global debt situation you have raised. We are close to 100% of GDP in global debt. And you are also saying we have to be more fiscally minded, but how to be that without going into austerity that will then kill growth again. I think we have like the highest debt level now since the Napoleonic Wars. That's not good news, is it?
Not at all. So what is necessary? First, to differentiate, there are countries that can carry the debt, and it is not a danger to them, unless, however, they are mindful, it may become a danger. And you mentioned the United States, deficit is high, there has to be thinking about fiscal path that brings it down. But there are countries where the debt burden is already far too high. And in these countries, we do need to offer a helping hand with that restructuring. There is the common framework that Saudi Arabia launched during their G20 presidency. It is slowly delivering, and we need to make it so that it delivers faster. However, I want to make on the issue of debt 2 points. Number one, how is that we can deal with it more sustainably? Of course, by having growth going up. We looked at the measures in the hands of policymakers, if we were to re-energize trade, if we were to get flow of capital to go where capital would bring highest returns, and if we were to build even stronger governance, within this decade, we can get 1.2% higher growth. In other words, we get to what we had historically. So that whole issue about fragmentation in the world economy is really serious. Trade and financial flows are the transmission lines of prosperity, and it would be a huge mistake to lose them. So focus on that. And my second point is taking from the President of Nigeria, reforms that are mindful of the vulnerable people in society. The Prime Minister of Egypt is here. Reforms pay off very, very well. So if we can have that leadership strength within countries to do the right thing and across countries to work together, the optimists in the room would say we are right. Optimism is well-grounded.
So, Mr. Prime Minister Ibrahim, you are also in a situation where you're caught between the G2, China and the US. And this is also a relationship that is quite volatile or fragile. And you're maneuvering this too on top of all the other challenges. Maybe you want to reflect on that for 2 minutes.
Well, it's not as complex because cumulatively, the investment in the United States remain #1 in Malaysia. But of course, in the last few years, you see these growing investments and interests from China. How do we navigate it? By just saying, look, we welcome investments based on our rules and don't dictate and impose any conditions. We will not, for example, enter into any sort of a decision that is deemed to be provocative against one another. And I think so far we have managed, not easy, as a small emerging economy, we have to navigate very wisely. And we are fortunate against because there is somewhat an ASEAN consensus on this, though not in full because different strengths, but at least within the ASEAN mechanism, there has been this sort of a position that we maintain our neutrality, we engage with both, and we set our own priorities. Our problem with some of the big economies, of course, they dictate, they hector, they're quite condescending, and you have seen that in COP28 and some other forums, WTO, etc. But I think this is where I think to engage more broadly with Africa, with Latin America, and in the Middle East, particularly what the Kingdom has initiated, would be of immense help to us. We cannot do it alone, and we will have to then engage. Again, I said I would to conclude that we are fortunate because within ASEAN, though there may be some minor differences on foreign policy issues, but the focus and the engagement and the both bilateral and multilateral relationship is excellent. We do not have any issues having to work together as a team. And that's why ASEAN happens to be now one of the most cohesive force, a sub-regional force in the world. And we are now focusing more on trade investments, intra-trade investments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister. President Tinubu, you have dealt with the domestic economic challenges, and in many ways Nigeria is a superpower in its region. But the region is looking also very challenging with Sahel, with the situation in Mali, Chad, also now in Niger. And I know the time is short, but is there any way we can see a stabilization in your surroundings in the years to come, or is it, does it look very, very grim?
Thank you very much. We are encouraging the entire world to pay attention to Sahel and the and the countries around us in ECOWAS. As the chairman of the ECOWAS, I've witnessed the big influence of Nigeria to discourage unconstitutional change of government. That is stabilizing. Equally, we have eased the sanctions. We need to trade with one another, not fight each other. It is very, very necessary and compulsory for us to engender growth, stability, and economic prosperity for our people. The rest of the world needs to look at fundamentals of the problem, not just ordinary geopolitically. It has to go to the root. As the world paid attention to the poverty level of Sahel and the rest of ECOWAS, have they helped the infusion of capital and pay adequate attention to the exploitation and opportunities availed by the mineral resources that is available? Are we going to play only a big brother's role in a talk shop without necessary action? We just have to be involved in the exploitation, promotion, and prosperity of that region in order to see peace and stability and economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you. So, President Kagame, we have this West-East challenge, but we also lately had this North-South. So a lot of the South is saying that there are double standards from the North.
Yes.
So how do you look at this, and is there a way for the North to regain the trust of the South? And someone in the North maybe would say the same, but I think it's mainly now South-North. So in 2 minutes, you can give us the full description and the blueprint for that.
Well, first of all, the divide is there. Let's not be vague about it. And we need to avoid it. We need to fight it. For example, if you look at it from the perspective of the global shocks that we talk about here and there, irrespective of where they have come from, all countries in the world are affected. Of course, some affected more than others. But that's fine. But that is a reminder that we need to, therefore, look at what has been talked about, the inclusiveness that we are talking about, and collaboration that brings different entities of the world together. So for that, we must be able to call out hypocrisy for whenever we see it. And it is there because we keep talking about North-South divide or other divides, but we don't find easily and quickly the solution to that. Yet we can. We know that we can do that. Therefore, and in this case, I'm going to argue for our continent, the continent of Africa, which, by the way, has the fastest growing middle class. And in fact, in not too distant future, it will be the only place that has a growing middle class. Mm-hmm. So how can you forget that this is a very important place on our in our world. Now, two things have to happen. The rest of the world have got to see that this is an important place to invest with and invest in. That's one. Second is for Africa itself to avoid any victim mentality and start raising ourselves to the level where we should be, in fact, where we are, that we are a very important geographical part of our world, and with a lot of resources. It's not just natural resources, it's the people at the same time. So I think being reasonable, seeing things for what they are, and then being upfront in fighting for the rights, therefore, maybe we shall be able to narrow the divide, but Africa has a very important place to be, an important role to play.
Thank you. Yep. So, Peter Orsag, you were mentioning that there are factors that can definitely increase productivity in this coming decade. You also mentioned what is happening in life sciences, AI. Are these factors strong enough to increase so much the productivity so we can see prosperity and avoid tepid growth in the coming decade? What are the additional policy measures that we need on a global level to avoid, to repeat, that the 20s will be the new 70s?
Sure. Well, I think the threat is not necessarily to growth, but rather to inequality and inclusion. Yep. There is major risk, for example, from the biotech revolution that the growing gap in life expectancy in the United States, for example, something like 2/3 of the American population has had flat to declining life expectancy over the past 25 years, while the very most advantaged socioeconomic groups have seen dramatic increases in life expectancy. It's not hard to imagine that being exacerbated by the new technology. So I think many of the points that have already been raised about the need for inclusive growth is the key part, as opposed to whether there'll be growth. And then one final point, which is everyone here is currently in a region that has a major advantage, as do the countries on this panel, the leaders of the countries on this panel, relative to many other places in the world, which has to do with demography. And we haven't touched upon that. The total fertility rate globally has fallen in half, and the share of the population over age 65 has doubled since 1950. Those areas that have, and by the way, don't allow yourself to fall into the trap of very low fertility rates and thinking that they can increase. I think the experience in China has shown that the move away from the one-child policy really hasn't worked. So it's a huge advantage to have a dynamic population, and that's one of the reasons why at least I'm excited to be here, and to be on this panel with many of the leaders of countries that have that dynamism, because that's a major advantage going forward.
Thank you. So, this has been a great panel, but please be seated still. For those that don't speak Arabic fluently, I ask you to take on your headset and tune in, because I think we can't have a session with this and also with President Abbas of Palestine here with us. And we know there are very important negotiations now going on in and between different actors and players that are here, also on the situation in Gaza, but also if there is a path for peace moving forward. So, Mr. President, you agreed to say a very few words about the situation, and I think on behalf of all participants, really welcome.
Thank you very much. In the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate. At the outset, allow me to express my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for organizing this very important global meeting among many other important events covering different topics for the benefit of the whole world, including the Palestinian situation. Especially, I would like to thank the King of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, King Salman, and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Ladies and gentlemen, whenever we talk about Gaza and what is happening in Gaza, we cannot but go back 75 years when the Israeli occupation started in Palestine. This occupation, which is still continuing until today, relentlessly and without any progress or change towards a solution. We cannot talk about Gaza without talking about the 75-year occupation of Israel, where Palestine is suffering and the world is watching. If we want to talk about Gaza specifically and about the 7th of October specifically, we can say, of course, this is a pivotal date where civilians were attacked. And from the beginning, we condemned it. From the 7th of October, we condemned this attack and we refuse it. Since the occupation started, we confirmed that as a Palestinian Authority and as a Palestinian Liberation Organization, we completely refuse the attack on any civilian, whoever they are, and whatever their affiliation, belonging, or nationality. And at the same time, we said we cannot but ask for a ceasefire of Gaza because it is hurtful. We know its results and we know its reasons. The first thing we ask for is a ceasefire. And secondly, we want the humanitarian aid to be able to reach the Palestinian people who are in dire need of it in all of Gaza. And third, we will not accept in any case the displacement of Palestinians from Gaza or from the West Bank outside their country. They must stay in their country. They must stay in their nation. We must not repeat the Nakba of 1948 and of 1967. These are our requests. And we said we must, at the end of the day, reach a political solution that joins between Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem in one independent state through an international conference. And this is what we have been repeatedly requesting since the 7th of October. But what happened since the 7th of October, as you may very well know, where more than 200 days have passed, and Israel took advantage of that attack to retaliate disproportionately against the people of Gaza under the pretext that it wants to take revenge of Hamas. But in fact, what it is doing, it is taking a revenge from the Palestinian people as a whole. It is killing civilians, Palestinian civilians. This is what's been happening for 200 days. In figures, let me tell you, Israel has killed, 34,000 people in 200 days from Gaza, most of whom are children, women, and older persons. It has wounded 75,000 people from among Gaza civilians, which means that the total victims since 7th of October in Palestine was 110,000 people, of both people who are killed and who are wounded. And we add to this that it has destroyed 75% of the whole Gaza Strip, 75% of institutions, buildings, roads, mosques, churches, etc. Gaza has become completely destroyed. 75% is not to be taken lightly. Borrell said before a few days ago that what is happening in Gaza has never happened, not even in the Second World War in Germany. Others have confirmed and have acknowledged that what is happening today in Gaza and in the West Bank has exceeded what took place in the Second World War in Germany and in other European countries. So the situation, ladies and gentlemen, in Gaza is unfortunate. We have been, since the beginning, calling for a ceasefire and for the people of Gaza to be able to access humanitarian aid. And we must be warned from the displacement and the migration of 2.2 million Palestinians from their homes and from Palestine. This will mean that we are facing a new Palestinian Nakba. Allow me to tell you at the end that what is happening in Gaza and what will happen in the next few days and what will Israel do in the next few days is the invasion of the city of Rafah, because all the Palestinians of Gaza have gathered in Rafah. Only a small strike is all it takes to force everyone to leave Palestine, and we will be witnessing the greatest catastrophe in the history of the Palestinian people. We ask Israel to stop its attack. We call upon especially the United States of America to request Israel to hold its fire, to cease its fire, because the United States is the only country that can prevent Israel from perpetrating that crime. This is what is happening in Gaza. And what are we asking for? We are asking the world these three things I have mentioned to you. And as long as the world has acknowledged Palestine as an independent state with observer status in the United Nations in 2011, to consider it a full member of the United Nations, and thus to acknowledge the state of Palestine. And I call upon all countries to acknowledge the state of Palestine as it acknowledged the state of Israel. These two countries are subject to one Security Council resolution, but the world acknowledged the state of Israel, but not the state of Palestine. We ask the world to commit to its obligations and acknowledge the state of Palestine. And after acknowledging the state of Palestine, only then can we sit down with Israel and negotiate on the borders, and only then can everyone enjoy full peace. This is our right as Palestinians, to have the right to self-determination, to have the right of our own state, similarly to all peoples of the world. This is, in brief, all what we are asking for, and this is the situation in Gaza. And, of course, what is happening in the West Bank. And what I fear, after Israel finishes with Gaza, it will turn to the West Bank to deport its people towards Jordan. Both Egypt and Jordan refused the deportation of the Palestinians from Palestine to their countries. But Israel needs someone to force it to stop, to convince Israel that this is unacceptable, and the only country in the world that can do that and which we hold responsible is the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to you, President Abbas. We also have the key foreign ministers from the region and also from the G7 here in the coming days discussing other ways of breaking the current impasse. And thank you, President Abbas, for coming. And also a big thank you to this great panel that we were so privileged to gather here. It was very enlightening, and I think everyone really appreciated that as our opening plenary at our special meeting here in Saudi Arabia. Give the panel another applause. Thank you.
Baik, itu saja sebentar tadi selesai sudah plenari pembukaan untuk mesyuarat khas World Economic Forum di Arab Saudi yang mana antara lain menampilkan Perdana Menteri Malaysia Datuk Seri Ibrahim bersama-sama dengan Presiden Rwanda, Presiden Nigeria, juga Managing Director daripada International Monetary Fund IMF dan juga CEO yang juga bersama dengan plenari sebelah tadi. Dan untuk waktu ini kita ingin bersama kembali dengan Fithra Faisal Hastiadi, penganalisis politik, untuk mendapatkan sedikit kupasan dan ulasan daripada apa yang dibincangkan. Fithra, banyak dikupaskan dan antara lain dibangkitkan Presiden Nigeria dan Presiden Rwanda yang menyatakan bahawa populasi yang vibrant, yang muda, itu merupakan salah satu dari faktor utama untuk pastikan ekonomi pada masa akan datang lebih mampan. Dan itu merupakan situasi yang sedikit berbeza untuk beberapa negara termasuklah Jepun, Korea Selatan, Malaysia juga yang menuju ke negara menua yang akan kehilangan lebih banyak populasi belia. Bagaimana kita berdepan dengan cabaran ini, Fithra?
Ya, itu adalah yang dibutuhkan dunia, konsolidasi, di mana developed nations dalam hal ini mengalami aging, sementara developing countries berkembang dan bertumbuh, dan oleh karenanya untuk bisa tumbuh bersama-sama butuh kolaborasi yang inklusif tentunya ya. Nah, kita bicara mengenai kolaborasi inklusif, sebagaimana yang tadi sempat dimention oleh Presiden Rwanda dan juga Presiden Nigeria, bahwa kita membutuhkan hubungan yang tidak eksploitatif. Selama ini negara-negara maju, developed countries, terutama negara-negara besar, itu menganggap bahwa negara berkembang itu menjadi subordinasinya. Padahal kita sekarang dalam hubungan antar negara yang sifatnya lebih multipolar, tidak lagi north-led growth, tetapi kita menjadikan dunia itu sekarang menjadi multipolar growth, terutama yang didrive oleh negara-negara berkembang. Bagaimana kita melihat sekarang sumber-sumber pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia itu justru berasal dari emerging markets. Kita bicara dalam hal ini dalam konteks perkembangan atau pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia, yang mana yang paling cepat tumbuh adalah di wilayah Asia. Dan Asia dalam hal ini kita melihat ASEAN sebagai salah satu center atau pusat pertumbuhan ekonomi global. Nah, oleh karenanya kita membutuhkan dalam hal geopolitical tensions yang mengkutub seperti ini, friendshoring, kita membutuhkan negara-negara maju terutama untuk menurunkan egonya. Nah, saya sepakat tadi Datuk Anwar menyebutkan mengenai bagaimana Malaysia dan ini secara umum ASEAN masih bisa menangkap peluang-peluang dari Amerika Serikat, masih bisa menangkap peluang-peluang dari China, sebagaimana yang kita sampaikan di awal tadi sebelum sesi, bahwa ya ASEAN cukup netral dalam hal ini untuk menangkap peluang-peluang itu. Tetapi sebenarnya untuk kemudian bisa lebih sustainable, berkesinambungan, kita juga membutuhkan negara-negara besar untuk menurunkan egonya dan menghilangkan double standard. Nah, ini yang juga sebelumnya ditulis oleh Pak Prabowo elected President of Indonesia beberapa waktu yang lalu di Economist 26 April, bahwa negara-negara maju dalam konteks geopolitik Israel versus Palestine dan Russia versus Ukraine ini mengalami atau menciptakan suatu kondisi yang disebut double standard tadi. Dunia, terutama Barat, tidak bisa memahami kenapa rakyat Ukraina itu diserang dan dibunuh, tetapi sangat bisa memahami kenapa rakyat Palestina itu dibunuh. Ini adalah suatu double standard yang juga disampaikan tadi dalam sesi tadi dan juga sempat dimention oleh Datuk Anwar bahwa ya Barat itu memiliki double standard itu. Nah, sehingga ke depan supaya tensi geopolitik ini bisa mereda, salah satu ukuran utamanya adalah bagaimana negara-negara Barat, terutama dalam hal ini Amerika Serikat, sebagai patron geopolitik dunia untuk menurunkan standar egonya. Jadi melihat bahwa semuanya itu equal. Kemudian kalau misalnya itu bisa terjadi, sebagaimana yang tadi disampaikan oleh perwakilan dari Palestina, bahwa ya ini semuanya tergantung Amerika Serikat. Ketika Amerika Serikat mengenyahkan double standard tadi, maka kita pastinya bisa berkongsi. Dan the lowest common denominator dari semua itu adalah kepentingan ekonomi. Gitu.
Ya, dan antara perkara yang menarik juga dibangkitkan oleh CEO Lazard, antara lain kata Peter Ozak bahawa cabaran untuk membawa negara-negara dan ekonomi ke arah kehadapan yang lebih mampan, termasuklah berkenaan dengan peralihan tenaga dan sebagainya, termasuk juga dengan AI, adalah kerana berbanyak negara yang ada terlalu banyak polisi yang diikat dengan isu-isu geopolitik yang akhirnya menyebabkan syarikat-syarikat tidak boleh membuat keputusan yang lebih pantas kerana mereka terikat dengan polisi yang bersifat politik daripada kerajaan masing-masing. Pada masa yang sama, syarikat-syarikat ini juga berdepan dengan situasi di mana polisi terlalu sedikit kerana banyak ruang itu diminta oleh kerajaan diisi sendiri oleh syarikat-syarikat ini, khususnya berkenaan dengan pendidikan, pembangunan bakat dan sebagainya. Jadi itu antara cabaran yang dihadapi yang disebut juga dalam plenari sebelum tadi. Sejauh mana Fithra bersetuju dengan kenyataan itu, dasar yang terikat dengan geopolitik satu, tapi sama-sama sama terlalu kurang polisi di peringkat kerajaan yang akhirnya menyerahkan langsung kepada syarikat-syarikat untuk membangunkan ekonomi yang seharusnya dibelanjakan dengan dana awam ini, Fithra?
Ya, sepakat sekali. Karena kita melihat firms bisa berpindah antar negara, seharusnya fleksibel dan non-ideological. Tetapi sekarang kita melihat bagaimana firms, perusahaan-perusahaan, multinational companies, yang ingin kemudian melakukan investasi, perlu persetujuan ideologi. Dalam konteks ini, friendshoring itu masih cukup kuat. Nah, kita juga melihat bagaimana Apple mengalihkan pabriknya dari China, ya karena masalah itu juga, masalah perkongsian ideologi yang dianggap sekarang sudah semakin distinct, sudah semakin jauh. Nah, yang juga kemudian seharusnya menjadi titik temu adalah kita melihat bahwa pandemi sebelumnya itu menghabiskan uang yang sangat besar, sehingga menghasilkan tekanan fiskal yang luar biasa untuk negara-negara. Karena kemarin fiscal stimulus itu sangat besar dan luar biasa dan pada akhirnya menghasilkan government debt yang juga luar biasa. Nah, tadi disampaikan juga oleh Madam Georgieva bahwa ke depan yang bisa kemudian menghilangkan utang negara yang besar itu adalah pertumbuhan ekonomi. Gitu. Itu adalah tindakan atau cara yang paling praktis. Ya, karena GDP kita ukur dalam konteks utang, debt to GDP ratio. Bagaimana mengurangi proporsinya? Ya, GDP-nya bisa diperbesar. Karena ya utang kemarin yang digunakan itu adalah untuk pemulihan dan ketika kita pulih seharusnya pulihnya lebih cepat sehingga memperbesar GDP. Nah, oleh karena itu kepentingan ekonomi seharusnya menjadi tujuan utama ke depan. Dan kita tidak bisa mencapai pertumbuhan ekonomi yang tinggi tanpa kolaborasi. Nah, kolaborasi itu kembali lagi root cause-nya apa? Ego dari negara-negara maju terutama. Tapi sekarang kita melihat bahwa sebenarnya negara-negara majulah yang membutuhkan negara-negara berkembang. Karena pusat-pusat pertumbuhan ekonomi berada di emerging markets, berada di ASEAN plus countries, tidak berasal dari negara-negara barat. Dan bahkan kalau kita menengok ke negara-negara di Afrika dan juga Amerika Latin, pusat pertumbuhan juga ada di sana. Kita melihat banyak sekali negara-negara di Afrika yang tumbuh di atas pertumbuhan ekonomi dunia. Dan oleh karena sekarang seharusnya dalam konteks perimbangan, kita bukan lagi bahkan seimbang, tapi kita dalam konteks pertumbuhan ekonomi, kita berada di atas negara-negara barat. Dan oleh karenanya dalam hal ini posisi tawar kita seharusnya lebih tinggi. Dan bahkan dalam konteks yang tadi subordinasi, sudah sepantasnya negara barat di bawah kita sekarang. Dan negara barat yang seharusnya mengemis peluang-peluang itu kepada negara-negara emerging markets, kepada ASEAN. Karena ya kita yang sekarang dibutuhkan, bukan kita yang membutuhkan mereka, begitu kan. Dalam konteks ini kita bisa tumbuh dan berkembang menjadi the most vibrant region in the world. Ya, di mana mereka sekarang mengalami kesulitan untuk itu. Bahkan mereka memilih ketika mengalihkan pabriknya, balik lagi misalnya ke Amerika Serikat, balik lagi ke Eropa. Mereka tidak punya labornya. Yang punya labor siapa? Yang punya sumber daya siapa? Negara-negara ASEAN. Yang punya nikel untuk electric vehicle siapa? ASEAN, Indonesia. Yang memiliki sumber energi siapa? Negara-negara Asia. Dan dalam hal ini, dalam konteks yang pragmatis, seharusnya kalau kita mau tadi lebih jumawa, ya kita berada di atas negara-negara barat sekarang posisinya. Tetapi kan ya semuanya kita harus melihatnya dalam konteks yang lebih equal. Oke, kita sekarang membutuhkan negara-negara barat dan juga negara-negara di timur, dan bahkan North-South relation ini menjadi lebih seimbang. Tidak ada yang menjadi bos di sini. Semuanya menjadi teman, partner, multipolar dalam konteks ini adalah kita menjadi partner investasi dan perdagangan yang equal. Dan oleh karenanya ya ego dari negara-negara barat dalam melihat negara-negara berkembang itu harus diturunkan. Bagaimana mereka melihat double standard, memperlakukan dunia sebagai double standard ini memang seharusnya sudah berangsur-angsur diturunkan. Karena itulah adalah preconditions untuk kolaborasi yang jauh lebih erat. Kita mencari inclusive growth, yes. Kita mencari bagaimana teknologi yang bisa lebih adaptif dan lebih bermanfaat untuk dunia, yes. Dan kita juga mencari ekonomi yang lebih sustainable dengan green economy dan green environment. Ya, itu semua bisa kita dapatkan secara teknis, itu sangat gampang sekali kalau negara-negaranya bekerja sama. Dan untungnya dalam beberapa peristiwa-peristiwa justru kesulitanlah yang bisa menyatukan kita. Kita melihat bagaimana pandemi kemarin menyatukan negara-negara, berkolaborasi, berkongsi, tidak ada perang di situ. Ya, semuanya bekerja sama, bahkan dalam pihak Israel juga
untuk kemudian menuntaskan permasalahan COVID-nya karena dia tahu kalau pasti akan terdampak juga. Ini kesulitan yang menyatukan. Dan kita juga akan melihat apa sih faktor kesulitan yang akan menyatukan dunia ke depan? Faktor iklim. Nah, ini juga yang kemudian menjadi poin pembahasan World Economic Forum Special Meeting kali ini. Energi dan iklim. Karena kita menghadapi dunia yang semakin tua, yang kemudian semakin rusak, dan pada akhirnya sumber penghidupan kita di masa depan itu akan menjadi lebih terkendala. Dan ini adalah seharusnya kesulitan yang bisa menyatukan kita. The lowest common denominator, ya kita tumbuh, ya betul. Dan tapi kita harus tetap sustainable. Dan oleh karenanya saya rasa kalau kita betul-betul ingat dan melihat konsep atau kondisi jangka panjang kita, bagaimana untuk mempreserve environment, ini adalah salah satu faktor kesulitan yang menurut saya bisa menyatukan kita dan menjadi another the lowest common denominator, gitu.
Baik, Fithra, kita akan berehat seketika, kembali selepas ini untuk kita menyentuh secara khusus berkenaan dengan dana perubahan iklim, kerana menurut CEO Lozat sekurang-kurangnya 10% daripada GDP harus dibelanjakan untuk dekad yang akan datang. Sejauh manakah kerajaan bersedia untuk berbelanja sebanyak itu? Jawapannya selepas ini, kita berehat seketika.
Terasa rimas bila ada kelumur? Gunalah Head & Shoulders baru. Menembusi 5 lapisan untuk membasmi kelumur dan kegatalan. Bebas kelumur sehingga 100%. Head & Shoulders baru.
Kini tibanya bulan Ramadan. Bulan mulia penuh kebaikan. Segelas khasiat penuh kelazatan. Barulah kenyang dan bertenaga seharian. Sebulan dipulun untuk gandakan amalan. Hati tak sabar nak rasai kenikmatan. Tibanya raya semua gembira. Hari kemenangan kini tiba. Disambut bersama Milo lebih bermakna.
Kita kali ini kena scam habis betul.
Musim baharu yang lebih mencabar.
Annyeonghaseyo.
Kunyil? Please lah. Individu ke?
Individual. This is individual task.
Dah kena tempat sejuk. Tempat panas pun ada.
Ya, padang pasir.
Yang tak. Macam naik roller coaster lah.
Ada peran ke? Travel awak projek Bapak-Bapak di Astro Warna dan Astro Go.
5 lelaki penghantar makanan didakwa di Mahkamah Magistrate Bangi atas tuduhan membunuh seorang pemandu kereta lelaki dalam satu kejadian.
4 sungai di sekitar kawasan perindustrian Pasir Gudang di Johor termasuk Sungai Kim Kim didapati tercemar dan berada pada tahap yang membimbangkan. Kerajaan sudah mulakan inisiatif untuk menggantikan kenderaan operasinya kepada kenderaan elektrik EV dalam skala kecil terlebih dahulu.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro Awani menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Baik, bertemu kembali untuk analisis pasca daripada Plenari Pembukaan sempena Mesyuarat Khas WEF di Arab Saudi ketika ini. Kita bersama dengan Fithra Faisal Hastiadi, Penganalisis Ekonomi. Fithra, kita nak langsungkan lagi pembincangan kita dengan kenyataan daripada CEO Lazard yang menyatakan bahawa kerajaan harus membelanjakan sekurang-kurangnya 10% daripada GDP untuk dekad berikutnya untuk tujuan khusus bagi peralihan tenaga. Saya buat sedikit kiraan dalam konteks Malaysia sekurang-kurangnya. GDP Malaysia 1.9 trilion ringgit berbanding dengan bajet tahun 2024 ini hanya 393 bilion ringgit. Itu bermakna kalau kita nak capai 10% daripada KDNK, Malaysia harus berbelanja sekurang-kurangnya 190 bilion ringgit yang merupakan 50% daripada bajet untuk tahun ini sahaja. Maknanya, situasi yang sama mungkin berlaku kepada seluruh negara di seluruh dunia. Mereka harus belanja lebih besar untuk perhatian tenaga berbanding kesihatan, pendidikan yang secara tradisinya merupakan bajet yang paling besar setiap tahun. Sejauh manakah kerajaan bersedia untuk tujuan ini ataupun kita ada kaedah lain untuk tujuan peralihan tenaga lebih berkesan, Fithra?
Ya, saya melihat Lazard tadi melihatnya dalam perspektif negara maju ya. Karena Indonesia juga mengalami permasalahan yang sama. Kita bahkan dalam konteks budget itu di Indonesia saja sudah kemudian terpatri ya, sudah terpatok dalam beberapa anggaran sekaligus ya. Anggaran pendidikan itu sudah 20% berdasarkan konstitusi. Nah, belum lagi ditambah dengan anggaran-anggaran untuk pengembangan sumber daya manusia. Dan oleh karenanya saya melihat bahwa ya mereka atau dalam hal ini CEO Lazard masih melihatnya dalam konteks perspektif negara maju. Nah, saya melihat memang betul kita perlu untuk kemudian mencapai dan memiliki atau men-share budget ya untuk kemudian mengurangi dampak lingkungan. Tapi 10% saya rasa untuk negara-negara berkembang itu terlalu besar karena kita punya aspek-aspek prioritas yang lain. Tetapi tentu harus ada ya. Meskipun saya rasa 10% tadi itu terlalu besar. Ada tahapannya. Mungkin dalam 5 tahun pertama, yaitu beranjak dari 5% menuju 5%, kemudian di 5 tahun berikutnya kita juga bisa beranjak ke misalnya 10% jika memang sudah memadai. Karena yang perlu dilakukan sekarang adalah untuk mayoritas negara-negara berkembang adalah how to escape from middle income trap. Nah, how to escape from middle income trap itu kan berarti kita harus membenahi pilar sumber daya manusia, harus ada membenahi pilar infrastruktur, dan harus membenahi pilar institusional yang semuanya tentunya butuh anggaran gitu kan. Iklim adalah ya prioritas juga. Tetapi sekarang yang menjadi prioritas utama kita apa sih? Negara-negara berkembang, terutama negara-negara ASEAN, adalah escape from middle income trap. Nah, ini dulu. Dan itu uangnya juga sebenarnya cukup besar. Dan oleh karena saya melihat bahwa untuk menjadi ya win-win solution-nya, kita juga harus melihat bagaimana peran dari negara-negara maju itu untuk membantu negara-negara berkembang memenuhi target tersebut. Gitu. Karena biar bagaimanapun, negara-negara maju itu adalah negara-negara yang sudah head start terlebih dahulu. Mereka justru juga mengeluarkan polusi paling banyak sekarang ini, yang seharusnya tanggung jawab mereka menjadi lebih besar lagi dibandingkan negara-negara berkembang. Karena ya kita first thing first, ya kita ingin mencapai sustainability tadi, betul. Kita sekarang Indonesia juga dalam hal ini sudah fokus ke sana bahwa Presiden ke depan Pak Prabowo itu juga memiliki program green economy, green environment, yes betul. Bahkan ASEAN juga punya roadmap ke arah sana. Tetapi dalam hal ini saya rasa kita juga membutuhkan bantuan dari negara-negara maju. How we can collaborate ya dalam konteks global cooperation dan global coordination ini adalah ya bagaimana negara-negara maju yang saat ini memiliki uang lebih banyak untuk membantu negara-negara berkembang. Toh sebenarnya ini adalah kepentingan kita bersama juga. Negara maju membutuhkan negara berkembang dalam hal ini, bisa melakukan investasi, ya cabaran masuk uang dari negara maju ke negara berkembang untuk apa? Ya pada akhirnya untuk negara maju juga. Karena apa? Karena global environment dan juga ekonomi hijau itu kan sebenarnya tanggung jawab bersama. Gitu. Sebagaimana kemarin ketika ada pandemi yang memiliki uang paling banyak negara-negara maju itu yang kemudian mensubsidi silang negara-negara berkembang. Ada cross subsidi. Nah ini sebenarnya kita harapkan. Makanya tadi saya melihat bahwa sepertinya CEO dari Lazard dia masih menggunakan perspektif negara maju. Bahwa ya oke negara berkembang bisa juga dong untuk kemudian membuat 10% dari anggarannya untuk sustainability. Ya, itu kalau negara maju bisa. Tapi kalau negara-negara berkembang kita punya banyak prioritas tadi. Ya, ada pendidikan, ada infrastruktur dan lain-lain. Begitu Irfan.
Fithra, terakhir sebagai kesimpulan, adakah maknanya kita di peringkat Asia Tenggara ini boleh bersetuju dengan kenyataan Datuk Seri Ibrahim yang menyatakan bahawa dunia global north tidak boleh memaksakan hal-hal besar dunia kepada rantau Asia Tenggara kerana kita juga mempunyai hal-hal besar yang sedang berlaku dalam negara yang harus diselesaikan. Bahkan dalam konteks Asia Tenggara sendiri, Myanmar masih lagi belum selesai dan kita juga harus membangunkan ekonomi. Adakah itu maksudnya untuk kita bergerak ke hadapan? Saya ringkas, Fithra.
Ya, sepakat sekali bahwa semuanya hubungannya harus equal. Kita tidak membutuhkan mereka untuk they are telling us what to do. Ya, kita memiliki our own agenda. Ya, sebetulnya itu merupakan sejalan dengan agenda global juga.
Kita punya agenda lingkungan.
Kita juga memiliki agenda yang kemarin ASEAN dibahas mengenai Digital Economy Framework Agreement. Semua itu kita punya dan itu selaras dengan kepentingan global. Yang kita tidak butuhkan sekarang adalah the West telling us what to do. Yang kita tidak butuhkan sekarang dalam konteks yang lebih umum adalah bukan lagi fragmentasi ekonomi. Yang kita butuhkan adalah product fragmentation. Partisipasi dalam jaringan rantai produksi. Kita tidak membutuhkan fragmentasi ekonomi dalam hal decoupling antar negara, tapi yang kita butuhkan sekarang adalah kolaborasi. Dan prinsip dasar dari kolaborasi atau kerjasama antar negara yang sifatnya multipolar sekarang adalah equality. Nah, kita tidak membutuhkan bos di sini, karena semuanya kita adalah partner yang setara.
Ya, terima kasih kepada Fithra Faisal Hastiadi, penganalisis ekonomi setia bersama kita sejak awal sehinggalah ketika ini untuk berkongsi perspektif sebelum dan juga pasca daripada plenari pembukaan untuk Mesyuarat Khas WEF di Arab Saudi. Terima kasih sekali Fithra. Itu sahaja kupasan untuk waktu ini untuk kita memahami cabaran ekonomi yang dihadapi, juga dikaitkan dengan cabaran geopolitik yang ketika berlangsung di seluruh dunia, termasuk di Rusia, di Asia Barat, bahkan di Myanmar, dan bagaimanakah rantau Asia Tenggara ini seharusnya dibenarkan untuk terus berkembang sebagai pusat ekonomi dunia yang memberikan manfaat kepada dunia secara keseluruhannya. Itu sahaja kupasan untuk waktu ini. Saya Irfan Faruqi. Salam hormat.
Dune Part 2. Early Access di rumah.
Duke of Arrakis!
Fighting for my people.
One fight beside you.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
Dune Part 2. Early Access di rumah. Siwa dan stream on demand atau sila ke saluran 480.
Sarawak disasar menjadi negeri pengeksport padi menjelang tahun 2030. Sekitar 200 penduduk kampung hampalan singgah mata Pulau Bumbum sempurna menerima bantuan pemeriksaan kesihatan secara percuma. Seterusnya, Kerajaan Sarawak menyasarkan ekspor pertama gas hidrogen pada tahun 2027.
Sabah Electricity Sdn Bhd SESB mempertukar lebih RM500,000 untuk melaksanakan projek bantuan mesra rakyat BMR.
Penggunaan Android Box makin membarah. Kedai-kedai makan galak siar kandungan sukan haram. Guna akaun peribadi untuk sajikan rancangan kepada pelanggan di premis perniagaan juga adalah satu kesalahan. Aspek keselamatan, curi kandungan secara haram tak dipedulikan. Penat lelah pencipta kandungan tidak difikirkan. Mungkin mereka tak tahu atau buat-buat tak tahu. Jenayah pengedaran kandungan haram boleh dihukum penjara atau denda jika disabit kesalahan. Jangan biar perniagaan rosak kerana cetak rompak. Jaga nama, keselamatan dan reputasi anda.
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Saya Syaf Syukri hari ini langsung dari Istanbul, Turki sekali lagi. Dan seperti yang umum tahu, kami delegasi Malaysia di bawah MyCare sebenarnya dalam misi untuk menyertai Break the Siege Freedom Flotilla to Gaza, menghantar bantuan ke Gaza. Namun seperti yang kita laporkan, Astro AWANI berikan sudah melaporkan kepada anda dari masa ke semasa, dan yang terbaru kita memaklumkan kepada anda bahawa misi ini akan ditangguhkan kerana berlaku kekacauan dari pihak rejim Zionis. Tapi kita optimis walaupun misi akan ditangguhkan, kesemua delegasi telah diminta pulang ke negara masing-masing. Kita optimis kerana kita yakin apa yang kita usahakan ini satu niat yang murni untuk membantu mereka yang berada di Gaza. Saya tak nak bercakap panjang kerana ketika ini kita nak memberi satu pandangan mengenai overview keseluruhan misi ini merentasi agama dan juga bangsa. Dan bersama saya ketika ini ialah pengerusi Humanitarian Care Malaysia MyCare, Datuk Seri Insinyur Dr. Kamal Nasharuddin Mustafa. Assalamualaikum Datuk.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik Datuk, terima kasih kerana sudi bersama dengan kita walaupun kita bersiap sedia untuk pulang ke Malaysia pada waktu ini Datuk. Datuk, pertama sekali bagaimana Datuk melihat keputusan yang diumumkan oleh Freedom Flotilla Coalition FFC untuk penangguhan misi ini Datuk?
Ya, pengumuman dibuat oleh Ann Wright selaku koordinator bagi steering co Freedom Flotilla Coalition malam tadi, dan kita ramai juga di kalangan peserta yang terkejut, tapi mereka memahami keadaan yang berlaku dan semangat tu tetap kekal. Dan ada yang bertanya bila agaknya pelayaran ini akan dilakukan kembali, kerana keputusannya bukan membatalkan pelayaran, ya, itu perlu ditegaskan, bukan membatalkan pelayaran tetapi menangguhkan pelayaran. Dan peserta-peserta dinasihatkan pulang, dan apabila pelayaran ini sudah bersedia, mereka peserta akan dipanggil kembali untuk datang ke Istanbul mungkin untuk menyertai. Dan saya tengok respon dari peserta agak teruja dan masih komited dan bersemangat untuk sama-sama menyertai pelayaran ini kerana hasrat murni semua ialah untuk membantu Palestin.
Baik Datuk, kita bercakap mengenai solidariti. Fokus minggu depan memberi fokus kepada solidariti merentasi agama dan juga bangsa. Bagaimana Datuk melihat, ya, kita berada beberapa hari dalam sesi taklimat bersama dengan FFC, semangat yang ditunjukkan delegasi dari seluruh dunia tanpa mengira agama, tanpa mengira bangsa dalam memperjuangkan hak dan juga nasib rakyat Palestin ni Datuk?
Ya. Kalau kita tengok dari sudut permohonan, ya, apabila FFC membuka permohonan kepada peserta dari seluruh dunia untuk bersama dalam pelayaran, 11,000 yang memohon. Dan yang dipilih kurang lebih 1,000. Dan dari 1,000 itu pesertanya dari 50 buah negara lebih. Ini menggambarkan bahawa rakyat seluruh dunia menyokong perjuangan Palestin. Bukan sahaja penyokong itu datang dari dunia Islam, tetapi dari Argentina, dari Spain, dari Australia, New Zealand, dari US, UK, dan pelbagai buah negara, yang saya katakan 50 buah negara. Dan ternyata bahawa usaha berkaitan dengan misi pelayaran ini adalah usaha grassroots dan international. Kenapa grassroots? Sebab apabila saya berjumpa dengan peserta dari seluruh negara termasuk Malaysia, ramai pesara yang dah pencen pun, tapi yes, we support Palestinians. Ada juga ahli bomba, ada pekerja guru, ada suri rumah tangga pun ada. Jadi sokongan ini datang dari grassroots, dari akar umbi. International kerana penyertaan dari 50 buah negara yang menyokong. Lazimnya kita fikir, ini Palestin orang Islam yang sokong. Tidak. Yang menyokongnya atas semangat kemanusiaan kerana mereka tidak boleh tolerate melihat anak-anak kecil, ibu dibunuh, bangunan hospital, sekolah dibom. Itu menyentuh hati mereka, jadi mereka menyokong walaupun mereka bukan Islam. Jadi kita lihat bahawa perjuangan ini adalah perjuangan grassroots dan perjuangan bersifat international. Dan saya kagum kerana bila saya berjumpa dengan, selama berada di Istanbul ini, berjumpa dengan peserta-peserta yang dah umur 70-an. Ada pun mungkin 80-an. Tapi ada juga yang muda, yang baru, yang masih menuntut. Tapi committed, bersungguh-sungguh. Yang paling saya kagum ialah Right, penyelaras yang walaupun umurnya, usia saya dimaklumkan berumur 78 tahun, tapi semangatnya mengalahkan orang-orang muda.
Jadi Datuk, ini sebenarnya memberi satu refleksi kepada pemimpin di seluruh dunia, khususnya mereka yang terus-menerus bersekongkol dengan rejim Zionis ni, Datuk. Kalau kita lihat secara realistiknya di sosial media ketika ini, di Amerika Syarikat, di United Kingdom, di Jepun, di mana-mana sudut di seluruh dunia, rakyat bangkit menentang kekerasan rejim Israel ini. Namun kita saksikan pelbagai bentuk persidangan demi persidangan, pertubuhan demi pertubuhan, mengeluarkan resolusi 1, resolusi 2, resolusi 3, resolusi 4 dan pelbagai lagi resolusi dikeluarkan untuk terus mempertahankan nasib warga Palestin, namun tiada apa-apa setakat ini, Datuk. Dan kita lihat juga misi Freedom Flotilla ke Gaza ini pun tak dapat diteruskan sebab kurangnya sokongan ataupun seruan daripada pemimpin dunia sendiri, dan juga pastinya ada kekacauan daripada Republik Guinea-Bissau. Pandangan Datuk keseluruhannya mengenai isu ini, Datuk?
Saya fikir isu yang sebesar Gaza ini yang dibom, dibunuh, we don't have to wait for others. If we wait for others to do, then maybe nothing will be done. So kalau kita tengok kerajaan di seluruh dunia macam no concrete action, dan yang paling menjadikan macam deafening silence, macam membisu. Walaupun saban hari dipaparkan gambar anak-anak dibunuh dan sebagainya, tapi tidak ada concrete action, tidak akan yang konkret untuk memberhentikan genosid ini. Jadi okey, tak apa, maksudnya dalam perbincangan dengan dalam misi pelayaran ini, kami mengatakan mereka tidak melakukan apa-apa, tapi tidak bermakna kami tidak akan melakukan apa-apa. Jadi kami peserta FMC ini committed melakukan sesuatu mungkin kecil, tetapi harapannya dengan penyertaan puluhan ribu dan impact yang melalui social media akan menggerakkan massa di seluruh dunia untuk sedar bahawa apa yang berlaku ini kita tidak boleh tolerate, dan kita pastikan bekalan humanitarian aid itu sampai 5,000 tan yang hasratnya disampaikan pada Palestin di Gaza. Jadi sedih dengan perbahasan perbincangan United Nations Security Council yang terkini bulan Ramadan, saya ingat mungkin 15 Mac itu telah meluluskan resolusi 2728, mungkin 2728, mengatakan bahawa perlu ceasefire, perlu dibenarkan humanitarian aid masuk dan dibebaskan prisoner. Tapi dah habis dah Ramadan, tak ada pun pelaksanaan. So pendekatan kita ialah, kalau orang, saya katakan tadi, kalau orang tak buat, jangan kita juga tak buat. Kita cuba buat dalam bidang kemampuan kita. Dan saya tertarik apabila di isytihar disebut malam tadi, kita tangguhkan misi pelayaran, bukan batalkan tangguhkan misi pelayaran sehingga satu masa yang lebih sesuai dan semua nanti akan dijemput kembali. Tapi ada yang bersemangat kata, if we cannot sail, we will swim to Gaza. Kalau kita tak boleh berlayar, kita sanggup kita berenang ke Gaza. Maksudnya memberikan petunjuk bahawa mereka semua komited untuk membantu Gaza.
Baik Datuk, kita mengulas lagi Datuk menyebut mengenai peranan PBB tadi Datuk ya. Bagaimana Datuk melihat itu PBB? Kalau negara-negara besar yang memegang atau mempunyai kuasa veto dalam Majlis Keselamatan dan juga PBB ini, bagaimana Datuk melihat peranan mereka setakat ini? Kerana kita tahu Amerika Syarikat sering memveto beberapa keputusan untuk gejatan senjata daripada tahun lalu. Saya kira sudah hampir 4 ke 5 kali sebelum mengambil tindakan berkecuali dalam perkara ini. Jadi Datuk, bagaimana sebenarnya dunia menghukum mereka ini Datuk?
Sebenarnya apa yang berlaku di Gaza ini sejak 7 Oktober 2023 khususnya, walaupun sebelum 75 tahun lepas lagi sudah kita lihat